What's going on, restaurant owners? I want to tell you about the fun we're having and the connections we're making over at Restaurant Unstoppable Network. As a matter of fact, if you're enjoying the podcast, you're going to love the network because the network just mirrors what's happening on the podcast, but we're just going deeper and making connections. Not only am I connecting you with the leading restaurateurs on the podcast, I'm connecting you with the experts that they're going to become unstoppable. Just this week, the co-owners of Relish Bar and Restaurant in Houston, Texas joined us, and they brought their realtor with us, and we went deep into advice on site selection. We also had time to talk about tip pooling. It was great. You don't need to break the bank on restaurant coaching and consulting. All you truly need is peers, people who can reinforce that you are taking the next right best step, and access to an amazing network of the best. I can't wait to see you there. Head over to restaurantunstoppable.com/live. This episode made possible by Restaurant Systems Pro. With excitement, allow me to introduce to you today's guest, founder of kitchen, restaurant, and bar specialist, Alec Bauer. My man, Alec, are you feeling unstoppable today?
Completely. Thank you, Eric.
Stoked to be here. I love talking to specialists, and you are a specialist in all things, obviously, kitchen, restaurant, bar specialists, but like really in design. That's your thing, right? Kitchen design specifically, your thing.
Yeah. I mean, food service design.
Food service.
Because it's at first glance, it's just kitchens, but it's not. It's kitchens and support areas. Of course, we design bars and all that, but for us, it's a lot about the whole project, right? The kitchen is where all the stuff happens and the most complicated room in the building. But despite being a kitchen specialist, we actually look a little more broadly than that.
Yeah, and I do like talking to specialists. I actually got a little heat recently because I said that I think not all, but a majority of restaurant consultants and coaches are going to kind of, I think that world is going to go in the direction of fractional executives, fractional COOs, fractional CFOs, with tools like Restaurant 365 out there. Now these executives can manage multiple clients, but not just tell them what to do, but to implement the tools and then to work the tools with them.
Yeah.
And I think that takes care of a lot of the P&L stuff, inventory stuff, labor stuff. If you're following the system and the system is the software and you know somebody that knows how to use it and implement it, that replaces a lot of those generalist roles in the restaurant industry.
Yeah, it does. It's interesting though. There's a range of consultant types in terms of what side of the industry folks are consulting on. What you're talking about is more of an operational consultant, more financials, P&Ls, labor, maybe even your broader model, not just your operational model. On our side, it's more about design development and construction, which is a whole other can of worms entirely. It's right. Everything that happens before the door opens.
Cue the specialists.
Cue the specialists,
yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I can't wait to get into your story and to find out how you got to where you are today and to unpackage some of the specialist knowledge that you have. But before we do, let's get that motivational, inspirational ball rolling with a success quote or mantra. What do you got for us today?
The solution is never prescriptive. It's just what's right for the moment.
Ooh, dive into that.
A lot of folks come in, and I think this is something, and I just came up with that, so I got to workshop it a little bit.
Yeah.
Appreciate that. A lot of folks come into a project with an idea of what it should be or what it can be or otherwise, which is a more prescriptive side, right? I wanted to do this. I wanted to do that. I find it's much more invaluable and success-oriented to sit with a little bit of ambiguity in the concept and in the overall development approach until you get more information, right? I was talking to a chef in New York yesterday, literally just yesterday afternoon. I was down there looking at a particular very interesting piece of equipment in his kitchen. And I was asking him about, what's going on in the restaurant. They just opened in October, little bit of a splashy opening. How's it going? He said, they're just hitting their stride and this and that. It's great. It's a beautiful place. And then he said something and I kind of finished his sentence, or we finished at the same time, which is you start with a vision. And then once you open, your customers kind of tell you what you are.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking.
And it's like, it's the same on the, on not so much the same on the design and construction side, but from an interior design perspective, from an architectural perspective.
Everything.
You come in with an idea, but you can't hold too loyally to that idea. Of course, you need North Stars. Of course, you need a
general direction.
A general direction, exactly, that your team is oriented around. But to hold too tightly to any one idea can be a little problematic.
Yeah, and no two scenarios are exactly the same. You could have the same exact concept in a different market, and it might have to be slightly different.
Yeah. Brief example. I think about this one a lot when it comes to experience versus understanding versus wisdom, all that around food service, kitchen design, whatnot. Something a lot of folks don't really think about, but how much ice do you need in a restaurant? Right? There are metrics out there that old school food service consultants would use, a certain number of pounds per day, per seat, whatever it might be in the bar. But I could give you 3 or 4 different bars with 3 or 4 different ice requirements, depending on how they do things, right? So it's about getting in and understanding what the operator plans to do, getting in and understanding how they plan to do it, and then asking the right questions.
Yeah, and then where are we going to put this ice maker?
Where are we going to put it?
Yeah, we're going to rent it or own it.
Are we going to rent it or own it?
Yeah, it just keeps going, and that's why there's room for specialists.
Yeah, spoiler alert, they always rent them.
Yeah.
Not always.
What is that? There's a company out there that I recently, it's like an ice cube with glasses. Do you know what I'm talking about? There's their logo. It's escaping my. But anyway,
there's a lot out there. Lot in like every city. There's a bunch.
It's a good business model.
It's not a terrible business model.
Yeah.
If you like, selling ice machines and renting them and fixing them.
And when your ice machine goes down, like if you're renting, you can have somebody come in and just swap it out. And it's a monthly expense versus having to have somebody come in and repair it.
Yeah. Not to get in the weeds too much, but hotels general, they want to be able to depreciate all their assets, and so they're going to buy them. Standalone restaurants, probably 7 times out of 10, 8 times out of 10 will lease them or rent them from one of these services.
Yeah. And this is the kind of stuff we're going to get into. And, you're kind of reminding me of like when I was 6 years into this thing, when I started this podcast, like my naive self was like, I'm going to crack the code. I'm going to figure out the way
Let me know
to
when
be
you
successful. Yeah, exactly. And like, I remember I was in Thailand and I was just like, I got to commit to something. I got to say like, this is the way, like how, but the reality is there is no one way. Mm-mm. There is 1,000,001 different possibilities to infinite amount of possibilities to get from point A to point B. And it all depends on like who you are, what your vision is, where you are, there's so many variables that come into play that there is no one way. So my intention with this podcast is to share the perspective, and then to give people that perspective and figure out, like, you need to figure out the way that makes sense for you based off of all these stories.
Yeah. And all the various factors that go in your particular business model, your particular location, your team around you and what their strengths are and what their weaknesses are. All the modeling in the world falls apart when you have a last minute chef change or a GM, something in their family, they're not with the company, and whatever, any number of things can happen and turn your business on a head. There's some pretty well-known operations out there that started out doing one thing and then immediately transferred into something else, and that's what they actually became known for. That's sort of the David Chang Momofuku noodle bar story, at least to some extent. Don't quote me on that, Chef David. Starting out with one idea, but then quickly realizing that that's not what people wanted. It's not what people thought they were good at. And then all of a sudden it's, we can do this thing, and that's not what we thought we were going to do, but this is what's killing it. This is what people are coming back for. So we're going to lean into this.
Yep.
Right?
Yep. Awesome way to get this thing started. So you got into the world of design and project management around 2009, and you didn't launch your own business, kitchen, restaurant, and bar specialists until 2014. But you were a chef and a culinary instructor before that. So where does it make sense? Where would you like to start your story?
Where do I want to start that? Let me back up a little bit. Started KRBS, my shorthand for kitchen, restaurant, and bar specialist, in 2010. 2010, yeah. So
ChatGPT failed me.
Yeah, as it's wont to do. Interesting that it had any info though. For me, it started my restaurant journey started a long time ago. Like legit was a busboy in a sort of typical, Chinese restaurant in suburban New Jersey, and I didn't really think much about it other than that's where I get dropped off after soccer practice. And, I'd spend the evening clearing tables and putting out bowls of mustard and whatnot and wontons. And always had a sort of photographic memory for food, sort of famously amongst my friends and family. Remember events and remember milestones in life and remember what people ate at them or what so-and-so had when we were at the such and such restaurant on that one trip. And for whatever reason, the food component, the flavor component, the nostalgia, and the memory trigger that we all get from food has always been really, really strong with me, really resonated, and was always sort of interested in unusual foods. I grew up eating a lot of pickled herring and like stuff that wasn't, I think, typical. And then, found myself working in restaurants later in high school, and then all through college working in restaurants, not ever thinking about restaurants as a career. Didn't even occur to me that this was a possible career.
I did see that you went to the New England Culinary Institute.
I did, right here in Vermont.
So was that later in your 20s?
Yep, that's exactly right. So I had been cooking for many, many years before I went to culinary school. Had been making a living actually working in kitchens, traditional American pubs and grills, Italian restaurants, what have you. Worked in Tucson, worked in New Brunswick, New Jersey, where I was in college, and a couple other places while moving around. And at some point realized that that was the direction that I was going. Like smoking weed and snowboarding wasn't making me any money.
Right.
And sort of professionalizing myself in the culinary industry was when sort of realizing that I needed to do that. Was when I went to the New England Culinary Institute. I was already living here in Vermont at the time, and at the time, NECI, as it was known, was a really preeminent place. I mean, it was right up there with the CIA. That's the Culinary Institute of America. In terms of quality of education, hands-on, 7-to-1 student-teacher ratios, running actual restaurants, serving actual food to actual people, and all of the attendant stress and pressure that goes along with service in that regard. So when I entered culinary school, I already had a college degree, was living with my now wife in a home that we already owned here in Vermont.
What was your original culinary or your original college degree?
I have a Bachelor of Science in Natural Resource Management, with a focus on applied ecology and fishery science.
Interesting.
Yeah. In hindsight, it looks like I had some kind of arc here, right? With a minor in organic agriculture also. Really interested in the ag side, which sort of, again, wasn't really planned. I was just kind of going with things that I was interested in. But over the years, that deep dive into organic ag and CSAs, community supported agriculture, and all that, which are super common. They're all over the place at this point. 30 years ago and 30 some odd years ago when I was in college, running a student-led CSA was pretty unusual. So got involved in that, went to culinary school after having already had a bunch of years in the industry. So I was much more well-positioned to take advantage of that education.
That's the way to do it.
Than some of my, 18-year-old, no offense to the folks who are 18 out there who are looking to go to culinary school, but they were living away from home for the first time. They were in college.
Some people know when they're 17, 16. Some people get started early working in restaurants. Maybe it's a family business, 13, 14, 15, and they know it's what they want to do. But that's rare. That's really like
I think even rarer still that those people want to stick with it.
Right. In the thousands or at least hundreds of people I've spoken to, it's always the ones that go into culinary school in their mid-20s where they take it seriously. And the value in a culinary degree, in my opinion, and feel free to disagree with me, is in the network you're paying for when you go to that school. You can go learn on the job. You can go travel and get all the different culinary experience you want and literally in reverse engineer your education through the jobs you're getting 1 year, 2 years at a time, right?
Yeah.
But it's that network that will open up to you that when you go, you'll learn the basics of cooking, but like, man, if you're hustling in college and your professors like you and they see that you have talent, like they will open doors for you. They will get you those internships and those pathways.
I think a proper culinary school education is potentially invaluable. It's also potentially really expensive. It took me 12 or 13 years to finish paying off culinary school loans.
Yeah.
You go and you spend 30, 40, whatever. I don't even know how much it is at the time. It was like $40,000 a year.
Yeah.
Something like that. And it's a lot of money. And then you get out and you're making minimum wage.
$40,000 a year if you're lucky, $50,000.
And I wasn't making that. The highest paying job I ever had working as a chef was $19.25 an hour. I was a union employee, the Four Seasons in San Francisco. Benefits and the whole thing going along with being a part of Local 2, the hotel employee, restaurant employee union. interesting situation, but I was much more in the I was making $6.50 an hour. I was making $9.25 an hour, whatever it is. It's hard to pay off student loan with that. However, as you and I talked briefly before we got started on this, the industry has really professionalized a lot. Wages are up for cooks. You've got a lot of,
out of necessity.
Out of necessity. You've got healthcare service surcharges and whatnot, and interesting models that operators are looking at. Tipping, no tipping, pool tips,
profit sharing.
Yeah, profit sharing.
I love that.
Tipping out the cooks. I mean, I spent a lot of time working in fine dining restaurants, making a fraction of what the servers were making out on the floor. And not to take anything away from the really, really professional, really high quality, dedicated, servers and sommeliers, and there's some really amazing people across the industry. It absolutely takes a team to run, especially at a fine dining level. But there's always been this imbalance between the folks who are working the longest, hardest hours in the back of house, and who actually are the ones for all the beautiful architecture and for all the beautiful interior design and for all the wonderful guest experience that these operations can drive, what you're selling is food and booze.
Right.
At the end of the day.
Would you change the way you got to where you are if knowing what you know today? Would you have done the culinary school?
So for me, again, it worked out really well. I was able to parlay my culinary school experience into two different externships or internships that I might not have been able to get otherwise. One was working with Chef Jean-Georges Van Gerichten in New York at the Mercer Kitchen. And the second one, when I was finishing culinary school, my second internship, through the great relationship that I developed with the executive chefs at the school, because they recognized, here's a guy who's really putting in the work, who really understands where he's going and is committed to it. And I was able to turn that into an opportunity to do a long-term apprenticeship at a restaurant in Paris. And I spent 5 months, 4.5, 5 months at a restaurant in Paris, Maison Blanche, Le Frère Porcel. It wasn't a Michelin starred at the time, but they were 3-star Michelin chefs. It was incredible experience that I would not have gotten outside of culinary school. However, that was 25 years ago. And today the opportunities are different, right? Between, not just even if we just focus on Instagram, for example, right? There are the velocity with which restaurant ideas travel around the globe is unlike it was before.
Right.
And you can be on somebody's radar in a way that you weren't before. And even as the opportunities that have opened up for people to be YouTube content creators in the culinary space, right? That's a completely
personal chefs.
You don't need a culinary degree to do that. You just need to be good.
Right.
Right. And I will say this is one thing that does remain true in the restaurant industry that is a bit of a departure from what you were saying before about culinary school, which I don't necessarily disagree with, but the restaurant industry really, really underscores work ethic, talent, and the ability to make something of yourself that is completely independent of degrees, certifications, any kind of other specific acknowledgments, or even speaking English as a native language or otherwise. I've seen so many people be so successful in this industry without the formal training that you would expect from a typical fine dining cook or what have you.
And I'm spending time on this subject because it hasn't come out yet, but you're also a culinary instructor.
I was. So I was, that was an interesting time. I was, again, still here in Vermont. I had finished an apprenticeship in France. I had worked at a crazy, crazy fine dining restaurant, 18, 20 course, prefix menus, real gastronomic approach. And again, this goes back to, 2002 or 2003, somewhere around there. And at one point, one of the executive chefs at the culinary school heard that I was back in Vermont and that I was commuting this ridiculous commute to work at what at the time was one of only 2 or maybe 3 Relais Chateau properties in the state of Vermont. And are you familiar with Relais Chateau?
No.
Sort of it's not quite Michelin, but it's kind of in that range. It's a certification for restaurants and hotels and whatnot that they can gain. That's a real measure of quality and a real measure of culinary thinking and forward-thinking guest experience and whatnot. And I was really sort of on that fine dining track at that time in my life. And
not to derail your train of thought, but what was the track? Where were you headed?
I was thinking I was going to continue on this fine dining track for a while, and I would ultimately, open my own place or open a place with other people or what have you. It didn't go that route, but at some point along the way, one of the executive chefs at the culinary school, who had heard that I had this crazy commute here in Vermont, like an hour plus each way in the snow and this and that. And he called me up and says, why don't you just come and work for us? We need a chef instructor in our fine dining kitchen. You get to work with Chef Louise Duhamel, who's a wonderful, wonderful chef. She had been in some really top-end properties around Quebec and Toronto area. It's a great opportunity for me to work right alongside a really talented chef. And initially you think, oh, culinary school instructor, I'm totally selling out. I really didn't think it was going to be that great. But the opportunity to take, and the way Necky worked at the time was you had these 2-week blocks, 7 students per block, and you would have students for 2 weeks. And then you would get a new set of students, and yet every day, 7 days a week, you had to put out the same consistent fine dining product for the guests.
Wow.
And so it was a crash course in training. It was a crash course in me being able to do my stuff really well, really clean, really efficiently, so that I could teach much younger people how to do it in their own way. And it was a great opportunity for me.
If you could wave a wand and create a system for education in our current model, our current industry, what do you think makes sense? How should we be bringing up the next generation?
The apprenticeship model is great. It's been great in
Europe,
most of the world. I think the apprenticeship model. The food service trade is a trade. It's not unlike being in contracting. Plumbing contractor, electrical contractor. It's very different work, of course, but it requires a specific skill, and it requires an understanding of
to be a plumber and electrician too.
Yeah, it requires it. Certainly for what I do now, we have to at least speak plumber and electrician. But the opportunity to learn on a job is in many ways superior to culinary school, because you can get in for much lower stakes.
Get paid to learn.
You can get paid to learn, right? And you can work your way up and really understand what's happening in a kitchen and understand what's happening in a hotel or whatever the property is. And
it's a ticket to anywhere in the world.
Again, the restaurant and the food and beverage and the hospitality industry rewards hard work. It rewards good, ethical, guest-minded experience when you're on the hospitality side. Now, again, there's so many ways to roam, as it were. You can get into food production, you can get into consumer product, right? You can develop a food product that you want to sell at the grocery store and what have you, and before you know it, you got to build a working commissary kitchen for your catering business or whatever. There's a lot of a lot of things you can do with a culinary education, whether it was born out of a more traditional school type situation or born out of an apprenticeship. So, a lot of things you can do.
Restaurant owners, what if I told you there was a way to lower your prime cost by $1,000 and get paid $1,000 on top of that? If it sounds too good to be true, it's not. Restaurant Systems Pro is offering that deal right now to 10 of my lucky listeners. Listen closely. Join the Restaurant Systems Pro 30-day prime cost challenge, and if you successfully improve your prime cost by $1,000 or more compared to the same 30 days the year prior, they will pay you $1,000. Find the link in the show notes titled Restaurant Systems Pro 30-Day Prime Cost Challenge. Click that link and get signed up today. Only 10 people are going to get approved into this program. Get on it. So you were a culinary instructor until 2009. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Let's see, when was that?
I see it's from 07 to 09 is when you were the instructor at the New England Culinary Institute.
No, I think it was a little before then. Because in 07, 09, I'd already been in the Bay Area for a little while.
Okay.
So I kind of went fairly quickly from culinary school through my externships, through a series of other restaurants, and then back to the culinary school. It was from the culinary school, again, to your point about networking, I was afforded an opportunity to interview with the Four Seasons in San Francisco through the executive chef of the culinary school, who had been the executive chef at the Four Seasons in Boston, previous to being at the culinary school. Still knew some people at the Four Seasons. I took some opportunities to stage and to do some sort of temporary kitchen interviews, as it were, as a temporary stage at some hotels in LA, and in San Francisco. Ultimately decided, my wife and I, to go to the Bay Area, and was a round chef at the Four Seasons, which means I worked in pastries, worked in banquets, worked in the fine dining restaurant, did all that, and then a former culinary school student of mine who was out in the Bay Area at the time working for a restaurant in Napa, I was talking to, and he said, "Oh, you got to come up here, right? We're doing some really, really great food." I went up there and I staged for a day, and I was like, "Oh, this is where I want to be." So I left the Four Seasons behind in the sort of union mentality, which was great. It's a great property. You know, I love the Four Seasons. You know, they're all super nice, high end, you know, kind of affair if that's your bag. But the work environment was a little more union, which is great, big union supporter, but there's a challenge in some of those environments where you have folks who they can't do this part of the job responsibility because it's not in there, right? It's not in their union lane. And in a restaurant, that can be challenging. And that's really on the hotel side where you see that where it can be a bit of a challenge. So went up to Napa, got offered a job up there, and was like, "Oh, this is where I want to be for a little while." And then, you know, sort of within a year or so of being up there, was like, I think I want to get into design. I want to get into consulting.
Yeah, I'm curious about that pathway in the hotel, the Four Seasons approach, that route. I feel like a lot of people, when they get into this industry, that isn't really on their radar. Everybody wants to go work in a restaurant, like an independent restaurant is like kind of like the path that most people, but that other path, to your point, offers a lot of security. There's a lot of benefits to that path.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, to go the fine dining route requires a couple things. It requires either a pre-existing financial security, or it requires the ability to manage with less for a period of time while you are cutting your teeth, right? Putting in your dues in the 1, 2, and 3-star Michelins of, you know, across the country or wherever. It may also require you in this day and age to go to Europe or Scandinavia or Asia, or the Mideast, or basically anywhere where there is high-end restaurants, and get that kind of experience. However, there's a long time to be able to get that skill set. The skill set that you need to be able to walk into a 2 or 3-star Michelin restaurant and actually get a job and be able to survive. It takes a while to get that skill set, to build up those chops and that understanding. And again, that endless commitment to cleanliness and detail and consistency and you know, stick-to-itiveness.
Yeah, but there's also the entrepreneurial path within the realm, the ecosystem of a hotel group too. So I'm thinking, I just recently had Philip Bollhofer. If I'm saying your name incorrectly, Phil, I apologize. Lots of names run through my life. But he is the F&B director for Parks Hospitality Group out of Asheville, North Carolina, or I don't know if they're based in Nashville, but that's where he is.
Okay.
And his job as F&B director is to go develop and engineer concepts.
Yeah.
You know, and that is a very entrepreneur. So like, it's almost like you're wearing that restaurateur hat, but within the ecosystem of a hotel group. And more and more hotels are trying to that symbiotic relationship between F&B and the hotel. It's a draw.
Yeah.
You know, so there is, you can get the best of both worlds.
Especially now. And that part of the industry, or that part of the marketplace, I should say, has also changed. 25 years ago, boutique hotels were new, right? There were still predominantly, corporate hotels, and they were not known for their high quality food and beverage.
You didn't know the restaurant was there. It was just like an afterthought.
It was there because they had to have it there as part of their brand standard, and they knew they had to have it there just to be able to serve guests. Whereas now, you have all kinds of different hotel operators bringing in all kinds of different chefs with all kinds of different license deals.
The restaurant's the draw.
The restaurant is the draw. The restaurant is what put heads in beds.
Let's get that rooftop restaurant going, and then that becomes why people choose to stay there.
Yeah,
you know?
And the sort of traditional corporate hotel route, even as a standalone approach, as you noted, Eric, which I think is really accurate, offers a lot of security. You're far less likely to
benefits.
Yeah, benefits. You get all kinds of things that are much more challenging for a typical independent restaurant, even a high quality, successful one. Even your successful multi-outlet operators in the independent space will still struggle to maintain healthcare and security and you get a lot of that in the hotel world, and you can travel.
Yeah.
If you're in one of these if you're in the Marriott system, for example, man, you can go anywhere in the world.
Yeah.
And there's some really great opportunities. I've met a lot of chefs who've, they worked in Singapore, or they worked in Hong Kong, or they worked, wherever. And I mean, especially across Asia, the the hotel scene is tremendous.
Yeah.
There's a lot of great opportunities there. Yeah. Again, none of which require you to have a culinary school degree or anything other than good work ethic, good good resume. You put your time in some good places and you can really write your ticket.
Yeah. So when did things start to shift for you from going to this, having a dream to be the executive chef, a partner in a restaurant? That was the trajectory you're on. What changed?
I think I changed. I had a sort of realization that the trajectory that I was on, and this was even a little bit before my son was born, I had a realization that the trajectory I was on was not a sustainable one for me.
What was that trajectory, and why didn't it work for you?
Moving towards being in the, towards being a chef owner, for example. And I think that's in large part because of where the industry was at 20 some odd years ago. And if I were now where I was 20 years ago, coming up, still cutting my teeth, I would probably stay the course, and I would probably continue moving towards opening a place or partnering with people to open a place or a group of places, or getting involved in a multi-outlet operation, either as chef or culinary director. Any one of those things could have been on my path were I doing it now. But again, 20 some odd years ago, the industry was still a little bit, it wasn't quite, Anthony Bourdain Kitchen Confidential anymore, but it wasn't so far. It was a lot closer to that than it is now.
So what was it so what's different now that would pull you back in that direction?
For lack of a better term, the culture within these operations, the sort of team approach that restaurants take, especially, I've seen a lot of our clients open a lot of wonderful restaurants, and I've had the great fortune to be able to dine in a lot of these restaurants, and to see the way they approach their operation as a team first, in full unified support of their hospitality and their unified endeavor to provide a fantastic guest experience. It's not that we didn't have that 20 plus years ago, but it was a little more, sort of everyone for themselves, just trying to get through the day, trying to get through their prep list, trying to make sure that their stuff was good enough, and not that there's not healthy competition in all these operations for the primo, for the great positions in some of these kitchens, but they're just done in so much more. It's all done in a so much more professional manner. It was a competition to climb to the top. Yeah, and it still is. Don't get me wrong. It is not for the faint of heart. Even a time to climb to the top of any given restaurant, let alone, the top of your city or your region, and then you get up into the 50 best in the world or whatever these other sort of awards programs are. It's a whole other stratosphere of operation, and we've worked with a lot of clients who live in that playground. Like that's the water they swim in. And I'm continually blown away, even now after being involved in 300 plus projects and having worked in a couple dozen, well, not a couple dozen, but 15 or 20 on my own. I'm still blown away at the level of commitment that it requires to operate at that level. And not to segue into what we do now, but having been on this side of the industry, meaning the design, development, and construction side, pre-opening, to see how much goes into building one of these operations is just stunning. It's a lot of work by a lot of people, and again, it was a much different industry 20, 25 years ago. And if it were as professional then as it is now, I think I would have stayed in. I would have stuck with it, and maybe, who knows where I would have landed. Maybe I'd still be sitting here talking to you. Maybe we'd be having a different conversation. So I don't know. Specifically, the culture, the team approach, we're here to serve a greater mission, a greater purpose, and we're all pulling in that same direction. It's less about the individual, more about the collective. Yeah, that's what I'm hearing. Yeah, it's a great. I always thought of, and I don't think I coined this term. I must have heard this from somebody else, but it's apt. I always thought of working in that fine dining, high volume, busy world as full contact ballet, right? These are team sports. These are team endeavors at that level. There is so much to do. There's so much to manage. So many details flying through the kitchen and the bar and the and the wine room and everything else that goes along with it. Not to mention the dish room, right? Where if one thing is going to break down, that's going to shut everything down, it's the dish room, of course. And it's just, it takes a lot of people doing a lot of things in the same kind of mindset, team approach. If somebody's in the weeds, you move over, you help them. And there was always a lot of that back in the day, but it's just different now.
Can you give me an example in your experience working in that environment of the cutthroat? Like, what was like the worst thing you saw of just like, I am like, this is it. I'm done. This is.
Let me clarify. It wasn't always cutthroat amongst the cooks or the young chefs who were going up, but it was so, the chefs were, not across the board, but at the fine dining level, at the high end level where I spent a lot of time, it was very, very hard to run those establishments and to corral, it's herding cats, as it were, right?
It's a lot of pressure.
To corral your people into doing things in your name as the chef.
Right.
And it's your name and reputation. It's your name on the menu. That whole thing drove a lot of pressure, and I think drove a lot of people to drink, but it also drove a lot of people to treat their staff in a way that we no longer treat our staff in the industry out in the world. I'm sure there are still some who do. They won't last. But I've seen fistfights break out in kitchens. I've seen grown men break down and cry on the line, or crumple in the walk-in because of the pressure, what have you. I've seen people get fired on the spot, walk out on the spot. Plates, sheet pans thrown across the line at people. Yeah, it was in a way, it was always like, holy shit! Like I'm just putting my head down, and I'm gonna butcher these 35 quail that I need to get done in the next 25 minutes or whatever it might have been. That was like, whoa, this is really intense right now. And there's definitely been a shift there. Moving people into this team approach, I think, allows for a much greater sense of urgency amongst the team that doesn't feel like it's all on them.
Give me a specific story. What's the worst you've seen?
Oh, jeez. I don't even know. I don't know.
I'll put you on the spot.
Yeah, I'll come back to that. I'll try.
Okay.
I'll come up with another example.
But one thing I do love about your story, Alec, is that I think there is so much opportunity within this industry that is adjacent to what the traditional path is.
100%.
And there is so, like, you're an entrepreneur. At the end of the day, you are a business owner. You didn't open a restaurant, but you started a business, and you're very much an entrepreneur. When did you start to realize what your specialty was? When did you start to realize that there's something that you bring to the table that other people are missing?
I think from a specialist perspective, from the perspective of what we do now, I realized as I began the transition from being in day-to-day operations and moving into consulting, which was a multi-year process for me. I enrolled in an interior design and architecture program at UC Berkeley. I was going to class. I was working in a series of restaurants that were not that they were not good restaurants. They were below the status of where I had trained previously. And that was intentionally so that I could relieve myself from so much of the pressure.
Create some bandwidth
so that I could go to school.
Just get a paycheck.
Yeah, get a paycheck and be able to do it well and not worry about it. And then go to school at night, which was great. And I sort of realized that all these years that I had spent in the kitchen and this restaurant experience that I had would maybe be good in service of people who needed some kind of design. And again, while I was going through this, I did not know that there were food service consultants who do what I do now. Like, I literally didn't even know that it was a career path or a profession that one could have or engage.
How old were you at this time where you start to explore architecture and design?
I was in my early 30s.
Okay.
Yeah, so it was definitely, so I had sort of two career changes, right? I'd come out of college and was like worked for the Forest Service in Alaska for a little while and did all these different things.
So if you didn't even know that food service design was an option to this career path, what was your thought then? Like, why were you taking these classes? What was your strategy?
I thought I was going to design people's home kitchens.
Oh, that's cool. That would have been really cool, though. I would love that job.
I mean, in hindsight, I'm glad that wasn't where I went. Now we get to design some people's home kitchens that'll knock your socks off, right? That are like true chef's kitchens in people's homes. And at the time, I was like, oh, I'll design just some like people's. I didn't know. I got
to know, what kind of budget are you looking at with some of these home designs?
We did a project for a home kitchen a couple of years ago that was probably, $400,000 $400.
I have my dream
$1,000 in cooking equipment.
When Restaurant Unstoppable makes it big, my dream
That's your
is
dream?
to have just a house that is home to a kitchen with like a bedroom off to the side. And I have this dream for a beautiful like home live fire kitchen. Like I want to have it be like a horseshoe shaped kitchen where it basically my guests will sit around me. Kind of like a chef's table in a sense, but like just being able, how often do you have company and you're in the kitchen and everyone's like in the living room or in the dining room and you're away from everybody? Why not just bring the party to the kitchen?
Everybody winds up in the kitchen anyway, right?
Yeah.
We all know that. But you basically just described another residential project we're doing in Lower Manhattan right now. With there's an omakase counter and 12 seats around a horseshoe and then a whole island cooking setup, and that's cool. Those are not our bread and butter. Those are very unusual, unexpected. That's my
dream.
Yeah,
when Restaurant Unstoppable. I'm not saying if, I'm saying when. You're going to be the guy.
Absolutely. I love your confidence. So to say that I knew where I was going with that, it would be untrue. I knew that I was going in a direction that felt good and that felt like it was in furtherance of something.
So you thought you were going to design home kitchens. When did you realize that there's a path within the F&B world for you?
So there was a publication a while back, a trade publication called Food Arts, RIP Food Arts. It was great. It was like a little bit of industry gossip, but it was mostly features of a couple of new restaurants, a couple of new things that were interesting in the industry, but it wasn't like all of the other like trade journals these days in the food service equipment world, which are really geared towards equipment and really geared towards, like the 9 newest ice machines on the market of 2026 kind of thing. Like it's cool, it's interesting if that's what you're interested in, but it's not it's a little bit about like culture and whatnot. But Food Arts was just good. It was good, interesting journalism, specifically geared towards hospitality and high quality restaurants and fine dining and whatnot. Anyway, I had a subscription to this, as most chefs of my era did at the time, and I read about a guy in there who had designed a project in Ohio. I think it was for the Chef's Table or Chef's Garden. They did microgreens. One of the early folks who began growing and selling microgreens, and they described this guy as like the kitchen designer to the stars. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. And he was in Oakland. He's still in Oakland, actually. And I cold called him. I think I looked him up in the yellow pages or the white pages in the phone book, and I cold called him and was like, hi, I'm Alec, and this is what I want to do. And we had a nice chat, and he invited me to come down to his place, and he hired me on the spot. And I couldn't do much at the time. I had very basic skills, but I started with organizing blueprints and organizing, catalogs from the manufacturers and sort of learning. Like I was like eyes wide open. I could not believe how much stuff there was on the back end of this industry. And I started to just sort of realize in time, because I started part-time and I was working for another architect and an engineer, because I developed some CAD skills and the ability to do some design. I kind of realized I had an affinity for this and that I could speak their language and that I could kind of understand what their design approach was. And it's not so different from developing menus or developing certain dishes and techniques that you want to employ or the sequence of techniques and whatnot. And I just kind of got more experience over time working there. And at some point, I was able to quit all the other jobs and focus on this full time. And there wasn't like an aha moment, but along the way, I came to realize that this was a much better place for me. And despite all our talk about specialists, in my mind, I have a generalist's experience, right? I've got operations experience, construction experience, now design experience, agriculture experience, right? And that sort of platform of background experience that I've just been humbled by and fortunate to have has afforded me the ability to look at people's projects from a development perspective and understand and see so many different angles.
Both sides of the aisle.
All sides of the aisle, right?
You've been in it, yeah.
So to be on our side, and by that I mean food service consultants who do work like I do, you need to be able to speak to chefs. You need to be able to speak to dishwashers and commis.
Not just empathize, but sympathize, to be there.
And completely understand their time and motion requirements. But then you also need to be able to speak with architects and structural designers and mechanical, electrical, plumbing engineers. You also need to be able to speak with private equity folks and talk about budgets and timelines. And you need to be able to, to work with the developers and everybody that goes involved. Like you see these restaurants in some places and it's like, how'd that get there? How did this restaurant with this chef in this time and place wind up in that location? And what started, and how many years ago did this project begin? And we've had projects that have gone 5, 6, 7 years.
Yeah, it's crazy the amount of money and time that goes into building out a restaurant. And
especially nowadays, a very common project type that we see throughout, small to large cities all over America are downtown urban infill. They are towers that are a combination hotel, an apartment, and maybe some condos or like a fractional ownership type situation. And then there's some common ground floor areas where there are food and beverage amenities, and there's maybe a pool or what have you. And then there's like lounge space for the people who have the condos. So their grandparents or their grandkids or their parents, you can celebrate an anniversary or a Super Bowl party or whatever. Like these amenity rich environments are very common now. And those things take years to go through entitlements and then civil engineering and then site work. And
I think that's a more appropriate approach to living than it's weird. Like the cities are unprecedented. Like we were never meant to live in cities the way we do today. If you're alive today, all you know is cities with millions of people in them.
Yeah.
But that is a new thing.
Relatively speaking,
Because it's a couple 100-year-old thing where you have that many people living in skyscrapers on top of each other.
Yeah.
I just don't think we were ever meant to live like that.
It's pretty efficient, though.
It is
terms of delivery of public services, power, water.
Was it efficient
waste.
Before the car came in and there was horse shit all over the place?
Well, he didn't have as many people.
Well, that's the thing. I just don't think there's so much land, man. There's so much opportunity to spread out and to keep things smaller and to keep it like I do hear the argument with efficiencies and public services and buses and stuff like that. But today, people don't have to commute like they used to. But also in cities is the only place you see extreme wealth and extreme poverty in the same place.
Yeah.
So it's just like I just don't know. And like I do see these types of living situations where it's communal. It's like this. It's almost like socialistic kind of living, but like social capitalism, where you share resources, but it's nice. Like you have 300, 400 people living in a compound or a unit, and there's a restaurant on site, where you can actually develop a relationship with it's kind of like a country club, where like you can develop a relationship with those people. Like I think it's an interesting approach to future living.
A big part of the industry development right now in terms of construction and whatnot is building really nice, high quality, amenity rich facilities for boomers to move into as part of an assisted living approach, where there are beautiful apartments and nice restaurants and these lounge spaces where you can bring your grandkids in or what have you. And there's also memory care, and there's also, doctors on site, and there's like outpatient facilities in the building. And these are
what if there's mixed living where younger people live there too, and their job is to take care of, like, you know what I'm saying? Like we could be way more creative. I'm fascinated with archaeology and looking back at, how we existed hundreds of or thousands of years ago, and looking at that community aspect, that tribal aspect of everybody having their role and intentionally keeping things small. I think that's where we're optimal. I know we're kind of going down a rabbit hole right now.
Interesting though.
It's all tied together.
Yeah, can be.
Hospitality and the way we live is all tied together.
We all got to eat.
Yeah, and not just that, but to serve each other. We all have to serve.
Agree. I agree with that.
Yeah. So anyway, I digress. You're explaining how some of these projects that we're talking about can be year-long, multi-year massive projects.
Yeah. We worked on a hotel in San Francisco on Market Street that started well pre-pandemic. Like a number of years, like in 2016, I think, 2017, they were done with site work. I think they had dug the pit and they had done some of the initial shoring and foundation work when the pandemic hit in 2020. And we were, if I remember correctly, we were the only consultant to survive the entirety of the project. We were we were one of the original team of consultants. Ownership changed hands twice. The architects changed the interior designers changed, the operator changed.
Wow.
Everything changed along the way. The general contractor changed. And at the end of the project, I think we were the only ones who had been there for the whole time. And it took 6 years, 7 years almost.
And when was this in your timeline of doing the work you do?
So I started KRBS on my own in 2010. And that was after about 4 or 5 years working for another consultant who I mentioned. And his name is Mark Steknovak. Great guy, real mentor for me. Really, really helped a lot.
Is he the one that pushed you in the direction of food service, like consulting specifically? Because he was doing homes for like the rich and the famous, right?
Not so much. A little bit for sure. We did while I was working in his office. We did a couple of crazy high-end residential stuff for some Microsoft execs and a few other super high net worth individuals in the Bay Area, Peninsula, Saratoga sort of area. But it was predominantly, he was a former chef, and it was predominantly restaurant work. What was interesting for me at the time working for him was that even though we were in Oakland, or his office was in Oakland, we didn't do almost any San Francisco Bay Area work. And so right out of the jump, I went from working at a fine dining level for some really good, well-regarded restaurants and chefs. And as I switched into consulting, I was so fortunate to wind up with a consultant who was building kitchens for the same type of chefs that I had been cooking for or had been cooking with, and was able to make that sort of lateral transition and still be relevant and still be able to add value to the process. Like, because I really knew exactly what those cooks were doing and what those chefs were doing, because I was just doing it days before, it seemed like. And everything was remote, though. Almost everything was remote. So long before COVID, long before Zoom, long before podcasting, I was sort of not even realizing it, but was developing an understanding of the communication requirements inherent in doing remote work. It's less so now because of Zoom and everything else that we have that supports remote work. But it was just fascinating to go through that process and be like, oh, okay, like this is going on like on the other side of the country, or this is an international job. But I had been working for him for 4 or 5 years, and then spent a little while working for an equipment contractor. Global financial crisis hit. The office that I was working at the time, Mark's office, we lost a lot of work. We had a lot of spec projects in Vegas and some other locations, and those projects dried up real fast during the global financial crisis.
2008, 09?
Yeah, 2008, 09. And then I went and worked for an equipment contractor, because at that point I was like, all right, I got a lot of years in the kitchen, and I got a bunch of years now on the consulting side, but the thing I really don't have any experience in is actual construction. So took the opportunity to go work for an equipment contractor, was fortunate to be able to get a job at a contractor during that economic downturn, and spent about a year doing that. Realized that still wasn't for me. It was a great experience, really learned a tremendous amount about a corner of the industry that is food service equipment wholesaling.
So bring me into that world. What is this is all new to me.
Yeah,
I never talk about this stuff.
It's it's a whole landscape, and that landscape has changed dramatically in the 15 years since I've been doing this on my own. 15 years ago, we didn't have Webstaurant or Ktom or the other online e-commerce purveyors. And the only way that you could buy a 6-burner stove, a commercial one, was to either go down to the local restaurant depot or to buy one through a distributor. And you couldn't, much like the, car dealership model, you can't buy a Subaru directly from Subaru. You got to go buy it at a dealer, right? And it wasn't until Tesla and Rivian and all the boutique car manufacturers started with this direct-to-consumer model. That direct-to-consumer model still doesn't really exist except for the e-commerce, and even those guys, it appears as if they're direct to consumer, but they're giant distributors in their own right. And so
you're talking about e-commerce Webstaurants of the world.
Exactly, right, where you go online and you buy a mixer or a food processor, or you buy whatever else it is. And
they just brought that distribution to the internet.
They're
the Amazon
or they brought the internet to the distribution model, because the distribution model is still the same.
Yeah,
it's cash and carry, except it's online and it's shipped, right? It's
the
otherwise
purchasing process is different.
Yep, exactly. But it's a whole landscape of manufacturers and engineers and sales reps and distributors and conglomerates that own many, if not dozens, of the brands that we see out in restaurants.
Yeah.
There are, what would they be called? Not a conglomerate. I guess we're a conglomerate.
Yeah, conglomerate.
And they own, they may own 15 or 20 or 25 different brands.
Like who owns Hobart? Not Hobart.
No, if I'm not mistaken, is a company called ITW, Illinois Tool Works.
And they own a lot, don't they?
And they own a whole ton. Yeah. Hobart and Metro and is it Metro or Cambro? Don't quote me on that. But Middleby, for example, is another big one, and they own Jade and South Bend and just so many. So there's the Ollie Group, and there's Middleby, and there's ITW, and there's Manitowoc, and those are big conglomerates of manufacturers. And then there are all the individual manufacturers, and you work with them when you do a custom thing or otherwise, or you need specific information. And then there are the sales reps, who are the ones who actually will get that information across to people like myself on the professional side, or will work with the end users, as they're called on our side of the industry, who are the operators, to do training or to help troubleshoot or to do service in the very beginning of a project, warranty service, that is, for the equipment.
And your role again was, what was your relationship with the manufacturer or the distributor? Or not distributor, but the...
So they were a dealer.
So
you would call them when you wanted to buy like a whole kitchen worth of equipment, like a contract.
Got it.
And so I was a project manager there. And so we would get a set of designs or a set of plans from somebody like me, or like I am now, and put a price on it. And then if we got that job, then we would be responsible for the furnish and the install, or the procurement and the install. We would buy it from the manufacturers, get it all, queued up, and then deliver it and install it at the right time.
No,
That's a challenging part of the industry.
What are the challenges? What was the struggle with that?
You're dealing with construction, and you're dealing with very, very highly specific utility requirements and dimensional requirements, and all the vicissitudes that go along with building and construction, and all the error-prone things that happen, architects.
So here are the specs you get. What happened from when you got those specs to when the finished job actually got to where it is, where you have to put things in a tight spot?
All that stuff.
Yeah.
And that's challenging. And you've always got problems on the job site, and they don't make a whole ton of margin, and so they are frequently working a lot of projects at one time, and so the staff is stretched a little bit thin, and it's a challenging environment.
So how has your world evolved since that point? Where are you today? Restaurant owners, what if I told you there was a way to lower your prime cost by $1,000 month over month and get paid $1,000? That sounds like a deal too good to be true, but that's exactly the deal that Restaurant Systems Pro is offering 10 of my lucky listeners. So why are they doing this? Because they consistently help their clients get between 15 and 25% profit in their business. And when they approach new clients and say, I can do the same thing for you, they get met with a lot of resistance. And because it sounds too good to be true, most restaurants think if you do between 5 and 10%, you're doing good. So to hit 15 or 25%, like what do we have to sacrifice? What scam are you throwing at me, sir? No, thank you. But the truth is they really do help people hit these numbers. And the way they do it is by having all the most important systems that are tied to profitability fully integrated into an enterprise solution. I'm talking like counting, inventory, scheduling, checklists, training systems, general ledger, balance sheets, costing cards. So when you have all those systems dialed in, ironclad, tied, connected, fully integrated in an enterprise solution, you get data. And when you have data, you can make little tweaks here and there. And those little tweaks, you can see the fruits of your labor, the effects of your efforts. And that's how you hit 15 and 25% profit. And on top of all this, they also have support, which is unheard of in today's age. So you get all these things compounded that help you hit that 15 to 25%. And if I have your attention, keep listening. Join the Restaurant Systems Pro 30-day Prime Cost Challenge, and if you successfully improve your prime cost by $1,000 or more compared to the same 30-day period last year, they will pay you $1,000. If you're listening on YouTube, iTunes, Spotify, find the show notes, and we will have a link titled Restaurant Systems Pro 30-day Prime Cost Challenge. Click that link and get signed up today. Only 10 spots, guys. Do not wait. Get your spot, lower your prime costs by $1,000 and get paid that $1,000. They're actually calling this a reverse guarantee. Get on it.
So after getting out of the sort of equipment side, install side, contractor side, I knew that I wanted to get back into design. And I wasn't really sure what I was getting into, again, even at that point. But I knew that I needed to do something different. Again, I had this notion. I was really frustrated on that, on the installation and the sort of procurement side and whatnot. Again, great experience, but I stepped out from that during the global financial crisis. It was not a great time economically. It did, in hindsight, even at the time and in hindsight, didn't seem like a great time to step out and like try to start something on my own. Like security should have ruled the day, right? I had a little kid at home. My son was like 2 or whatever he was at that time. And to go from there to where I am now was sort of slow, 15-year overnight success kind of thing. When I first stepped out, I still wasn't really sure which part of this industry I wanted to be in, although I knew this food service consulting, kitchen, bar design, whatnot, operational consulting, from a physical plant perspective, that is, was where I could really begin to add value. I had a couple of clients, some chefs that I knew in the Bay Area that I knew were about to step out and do some new project. And so I had a sense that I was going to be able to put that together and, managed to do so. And in the beginning, it's funny, I still think about it sometimes. After all these years in the kitchen, and then after all these years working for this other consultant, and then some time spent doing the contracting thing out in the field, those first half a dozen jobs were just so panic inducing. Like I was like, oh my God, I now need to do everything. I need to find the work. I need to write the contract and negotiate the contract. And then I got to do the work. And then I got to bill for the work. And then suddenly it was like, oh, wow. All those things that I've been learning along the way mean precisely nothing if I can't make these steps happen, right? Do all these individual things. Like I can't start a business if I can't do it's one thing to do those things working for somebody else, but then when all of a sudden it's just you in your garage,
right?
This acutely, right? Yeah, there's nobody else, right? There's nobody else to do the work.
Yeah.
And I was out there and I didn't have insurance, right? And I was like, oh man, this whole thing is like really, really stressful. But I knew that, I was kind of betting on myself, which is never a bad idea. And I just kind of hustled it, right? And I would read I was cold calling everybody. I was reading what were the new sort of food and restaurant blogs at the time. Everybody who was mentioned having some new project, I'd find them. I'd find somebody I knew in mutual connection, and I'd reach out and I just sort of pushed it, like sort of really hit the pavement in that regard. And in the beginning, I was doing what I would say was a very straightforward bit of design, some layout, right? Equipment layout, equipment specification, meaning choosing all the individual pieces of equipment with the chef, and then providing some documentation, right? And sometimes that documentation was, depending on the job, a little more demanding. Sometimes it was a little easier. But I feel like at the time, I was mostly doing that. People would come to me with a project, and at the time, it was almost exclusively independent, small, owner-operated, chef-driven restaurants, right? Because those are the only clients who could, those who would hire somebody like me. And I was too small to get anything other than that, right? The hotel people weren't knocking on my door. And 15 years and hundreds of projects later, I find myself, again, humbly and just through great fortune, to have had a very broad experience in developing and building food and beverage operations.
What was the tipping point for you? What was the change of
How so?
Of being the one-stop shop, the one guy who is doing everything from finding the jobs to writing the contract to billing to actually doing the work and building it out? Where is your business today? What is your team comprised?
So, shout out to Kevin and Laura on my team, my two amazing senior project managers. I was going through a phase in the business where I was drowning. I had done
When was that?
This goes back. It was only a couple of years in when Kevin started working for
2012, 2013?
Yeah, somewhere right around there. And
how many clients did you have at that time?
Probably 12 or something like that, 13, and I felt like I was drowning. Yeah. Maybe it was a little more than that.
Tell me more about that feeling.
Just the feeling like I couldn't keep up, And all right, so to make things more complicated, a year and change after starting KRBS, my wife and I decided to move back to the East Coast, here to Burlington, where we live now. And I figured, all right, before this business gets much bigger, it's clear I've got something going here. I can do this work. I sort of proved that concept to myself, and meaning my wife and I, we felt pretty good about it. And we had kind of always known that we weren't lifers on the West Coast, in the Bay Area, although who knows what might have happened had we stayed. But we came back to Vermont, and all of a sudden, right around then, so this was like 2012, right around then, the restaurant building boom in San Francisco took off. So it had plummeted during .com, bubble burst, and it was slowly coming back up. And then it seemingly right when I left, it just blew up. And I was traveling from Burlington back to San Francisco. And I still travel a fair amount to our job sites and projects. But I was back in San Francisco for a week or 7 or 9 days out of every month or more, 2 trips sometimes in a month, just back and forth.
Out of Burlington or Boston?
Out of Burlington,
okay.
Yeah. And it was, I just found it was really hard to keep up. A lot of time on planes, a lot of time in airports, a lot of time decompressing from a full day out on the job site, taking meetings, and then not being able to respond to emails in the nighttime, right? Having to do invoicing and like all that. So cut to where we are now. We're a team of 4. I've got an office manager, controller who helps with all my invoicing and compliance and all the other stuff we got to do, who's here in Vermont with me. And then and I got 2 designer project managers. Kevin's been with me for like 13 years, somewhere around there. And Laura since before the pandemic, so 6 or 7 years. And they both came with great experience. I'm incredibly lucky to have them both, incredibly grateful to them both. They do all the heavy lifting. They do all the detail work and all that. So where things have changed for me, and this was a really interesting process. And again, I sort of built and fixed this airplane all while flying it, right? As any small business owner knows. And along the way, I realized that I was sort of generating this experience because at any given time over these past 7 or 10 years, we may have 35 projects. Sometimes a little more, sometimes a little less across all the various phases of construction. Some are very early. We've got repeat clients who are looking at new properties. And then we've got projects that are in that long tail of construction. We've finished all our work. We're just waiting for them to finish construction, finish installing the kitchen so we can go in and do a final punch list or what have you, and then everything in between. And like everything else in construction, it's start and stop, right? You're waiting for one crew to come in and finish something before you can do the next thing. Jobs go slow for a little while, especially in permitting and all that. That's can be a very deliberate process where we don't have to do much on any given job. So for me to get to a point where I sort of understood what our bandwidth was, how many projects we could handle, how efficiently can we handle our projects and whatnot, that took a while, a lot of trial and error, a lot of overwork and some underwork.
Find the sweet spot.
Yeah, some lean periods. And along the way, it became a little more clear to me that my value add to our clients was in an advisory capacity on the front end of these jobs. I'm no longer necessarily the guy who's going to make sure that your 40-quart mixer also comes with a 20-quart mixer bowl attachment, for example. Like, that's not where my highest and best use on behalf of our clients is necessarily anymore. Now, we're covering those details in our documentation and everything else we do and in our conversation about that stuff. But I'm much more involved, and I think a much more value add to our client base doing a lot of the front-end conversations and front-end questions, or coming up with the front-end questions on a project. We're looking at we just got awarded a pretty good-sized project in Knoxville down at the University of Tennessee. And this is a large entertainment district that's going next to their stadium, and the numbers are eye-popping. They have 100,000 people, 150,000 people who come to Knoxville on game days with no intention of going to the game. They're just coming for a big football game, right? This is the South. This is football. This is college football in the South. This is a big deal. And we're going through a program analysis, right? And there's a lot of really great, really experienced people on this job. Looking forward to digging into it a lot more. But on a job like that, we're involved, or I say we, in this case me, I'm involved in all the conversations that have to do with where are we locating these different food service amenity spaces, and how are we going to come up with the sort of overarching plan for how they interact with one another. Now, this is no longer a standalone single restaurant. It's
a system of food service.
This is 10 or 12 or 13 or 14 different amenity touch points. It's a bar, it's a grill, it's a pool bar in the hotel.
I was just talking to Chris Goss, and he was talking about how he was a director of F&B for Stowe Ski Resort, and how that was 500 acres.
Oh, yeah. I know Chris.
500 acres of different facilities and units all over the mountain, and managing all of that.
We do some work in the ski resort industry. Yeah. We've got some projects out there on some of the resort properties, and they're like that a lot. Sometimes it'll just be a restaurant that we'll work on, but in the case of some of these larger projects, I've found that in the last handful of years, these advisory services, which is really sort of key to where we're going, where I'm going anyway. I mean, my team's coming with me, of course, but in terms of what I'm doing on behalf of my clients and what I'm thinking about on behalf of our client base and whatnot, is this advisory service approach. And this kind of dovetails with what you and I talked about in the very beginning about having fractional executives, right? For us, we're bringing high-level expertise on food service planning and design well in advance of needing to know stuff like, is this going to be, a 2-basket fryer?
Yeah. So
you have
the crystal ball. You know what to look for well in advance of when you need it. And where people just don't know what they don't know.
And so we are assisting our clients in making really good, smart decisions on the front end long before they get locked into something that is expensive to peel back. And an example in that regard is just the planning of what does our main kitchen look like? What is that kitchen going to produce relative to the other kitchens? So, for example, if that main kitchen is of a certain size, are we going to be able to?
It's like a commissary.
Are we going to be able to run it like a commissary, and the individual restaurants requisition product from that commissary internally to the operation, or are they going to license out that one signature restaurant on their property? Ergo, it's got to be a self-sufficient, standalone restaurant. Okay, do we have the right amount of space? If you're going to do a standalone signature restaurant here in 2026, are you going to have solid fuel? Are you going to have an open fire or a charcoal or something like that? That's key to where our industry trends are right now. And, that comes and goes. We do, I'd say, most of our projects have some kind of wood fire or solid fuel.
Do you know Grills by Demont?
I do. Yeah, I know
Chris. Awesome dude. I had him on the show. I love his work.
Oh, nice.
I'm sure you had lots of people like that in your network.
Yeah, we've done a lot of projects with Chris and his wife Ann. They're
so awesome,
super lovely folks. We were talking about them on a call just earlier. Oh, really? Earlier this morning. Yeah, for a project we may.
When you design my house,
you want a Grill by Demont?
Yeah, work with Chris for me. Thank you.
No problem. So that's just one of the perks for us because we're totally independent. We have no arrangement with any manufacturer or dealer or anything else like that. We're 100% client fee basis, right? That means we can work with whoever we like. On the manufacturing side, we're not locked into working with anybody. We're not, our bottom line isn't improved by choosing one manufacturer over another. And so then we get to...
So you're not making an affiliate commission on that?
None. Right. Zippo. We're 100% client fee income.
Why is that important?
It gives us the independence that we need to truly advise on our client's behalf with not even a perception, not even a whiff of conflict of interest, right? It does not matter to me whether you choose Montague or Jade or Heston or South Bend or Imperial or Vulcan or any of the other manufacturers of heavy duty ranges. I only care. This goes back to what I said in the very beginning. It's not prescriptive. My only interest is in what's right for your project, what's right for this situation. Okay, this is a pool grill. You just need a small grill, or this is a snack bar at the 9th hole. Okay, what do we need here? Yeah. Right. I'm not trying to overbuild. I'm not trying to underbuild. I'm trying to get something that's right for your property. And on the front end, our ability to sort of offer these advisory services is becoming much more invaluable to clients to see that, for example, we can be a fractional, dare I say, director of construction for food service, right? For lack of a better description of whatever that fractional executive would have been called, were they an in-house sort of full-time sort of situation?
I don't even know what that executive would be. I guess executive. I mean,
well, for big hotel
that are scaling, they have that person that's out there.
Oh yeah. They have a director of construction, but that person is also managing the architect and the civil engineer and managing the contractors and whatnot. It's in a smaller operation, that person's wearing many hats.
Right.
As soon as you start scaling bigger than that, you get into, and again, this is not the case for your, Raising Cane's or your fast casual, your QSRs. But this is very much the case for hotel and traditional hospitality folks who are scaling, because
restaurant groups.
Those are one-offs.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, maybe you have 3 of the same, but they're still pretty much one-offs. You're not building, this isn't an In-N-Out burger, right? Where every single one is the same.
You're not vertically integrating a construction company that is just cranking out the same footprint everywhere.
Right. Yeah. So you need folks who understand how to plan appropriately. And that's something that I didn't even, I wasn't even, no pun intended, planning on developing as a service until it became more clear to me. The example is, I'm on the phone with a client, for example, and we're talking about something relative to, an exhaust situation or whatever it might be. And in the course of a 20-minute discussion, not all the time, of course, but there have been multiple times, maybe not countless, but a lot of times where I realize after a conversation, I just saved you $75,000.
Yeah, and I think
in a 15-minute,
it's opportunity cost.
In a 15-minute phone call, I'm going to bill hourly for that. That's a weird. There's a weird value add mismatch.
Well, that's kind of where I'm at right now. What I'm curious about talking, and with our time that we have left, the people that are listening to us, keep in mind.
So sorry.
Oh, you're fine.
Bang that.
I didn't even notice. The people we're talking to are independent restaurant operators. Anywhere from 1 to 10 unit operators generally, or I think that's about my sweet spot for target audience.
Sure.
How can you save that person money right now that's listening to this? What are the things that you can just here's some low hanging fruit, some gold I can drop on you?
Yeah. It could be anything from, again, a real world example. We have a client in Monterey who's looking at a project, and they send us, as a repeat client, we've done a number of projects with, they'll send us a set of plans from a landlord for a space that they're looking at. Maybe they're really excited about it because of the location, for example, or they're really excited about the tall ceilings or something like that. Exactly the kind of thing that, an operator might get excited about, and they'll send us the plans, and we may be able to say, this is a great opportunity. You've got the right duct shaft, you've got the right provisions in your landlord letter, or we may be able to say, hey, here's what you need to go ask your landlord for. Here's what is going to be a problem. Knowing your concept, here's where you're going to run into an issue. So it may be a specific thing like a mechanical issue or a duct shaft type thing, or a grease trap or a smog hog or something that they weren't necessarily aware of, that they didn't know they needed.
Give me some examples of the things you've caught that saved people thousands of dollars.
Oh, well, it could be, sometimes it's saving people. Sometimes it's hard to put a dollar value on something like this example of the smog hog, where somebody, or a pollution control unit, where somebody may not have realized that in the course of their planning that they were going to need a pollution control unit, because the code in that city, for example, requires that if you're exhausting your hoods horizontally out the building, you need to scrub that air, and they need to plan for that. And if they were to miss that and move forward with their preliminary architecture and interior design and whatnot, and then find out later that they need this thing,
work has to be undone.
What has to be undone exactly?
Yeah.
What do you have to unwind, and how bad of an impact does that have on your operation now? Because you just lost whatever.
Not just the cost of doing the work that you've done, that you've paid to be done, that now pay to undo it, then pay to redo it. Plus, every day you're not open is operating capital going out the window.
Yeah. Now, a smog hog may be, again, a pollution control unit may be an extreme example of something like that might have been missed, or or it may be that our experience has allowed us to do certain things, or maybe the opposite, using the exact same piece of equipment. This is interesting. Somebody may have been looking at, a 15-story vertical black iron duct run up to the roof, not even realizing that they had the space and the capacity for a smog hog in their building. And that may save them an inordinate amount of coordination with the building.
You don't know what you don't know.
You don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I certainly don't know what I don't know, but I know a lot about.
Yeah, and the industry is only getting more complicated. The regulations are only increasing.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
When your job is running a restaurant is not the same as developing restaurant spaces.
That's a very, very key point, and that's where the specialists like myself come in, because you guys on the not you, you run your own kind of business, yeah. But you folks on the restaurant operations side, you can be incredibly good. You may manage your margins. You may keep a really tight lid on your food costs and your labor and have great branding and a great product and a loyal following. But if you don't figure out how to be good at development and construction, you cannot scale. Yeah. You cannot do it. You will lose money so much faster by building and opening improperly than you can make back by doing it again in a better way. Yeah. Right? It's really like, certainly as an expert in this field and as a consultant, I'm very much of the opinion that you hire experts and you let them expert, right? That's not always the case. We're not cheap, right? As consultants, my team, we're not. We have very high touch engagement. We have very, very deep bench of knowledge, and that experience will save money. And so we have to, manage our own costs and our own pricing and fee schedules and whatnot accordingly for what we're saving a client, not what we think we're worth on any given hour by hour type basis, right? It's a sort of project approach.
What hasn't been discussed up to this point that you can leave our listeners just better off? The knowledge that you have in this format that can just save people time and energy.
Yeah. I think the DIY approach that is, sort of intrinsic to restaurant operators can be a hurdle when it comes to development, because there are so many more things at stake and so much more money at stake. Don't be afraid to go talk to the consultants. Don't be, there's nothing, there are a lot of professionals out there who are invested in your success. Like, it's easy to think of consultants as just being, folks who are, rent seekers who are just going to collect some money and not give you a value add. We're not like that. And I know a lot of my colleagues are not like that. We are deeply invested in appropriate solutions for your project so you can be profitable, right? I mean, again, I don't advertise. As you notice, I have relatively limited social engagement kind of thing. We are almost entirely word of mouth and referral basis.
I love finding people like you. And I don't mean disrespect by this, but the people that don't have the social presence, but that have the word of mouth reputation.
If I had time to do all that, I'm doing something wrong in my business.
Well, I think the reality is, in the world we live in, if you're good at marketing yourself, marketing is becoming this unproportionally important thing. Where it's more about how good you are at convincing people how good you are, aside from actually being a reputable business owner that has, if word of mouth can carry your business, if you don't have to promote and market your business, like that to me that's why word of mouth is what I chase with this podcast.
Yeah, I agree. And it's very easy, I think, for businesses of all stripes to be better at marketing than they are at their core business.
I'm not saying don't market, but I'm saying it's become so proportionally important to the success of an operation.
And we're definitely in a niche here, right? We're definitely in a sort of food service specific zone where this is our lane. And this is what we do. However, within this side of the industry, again, design, development, and construction, we have a really broad basis of understanding for how projects get developed. It is rare at this point, and I say this with no hyperbole or pride or otherwise, just objective truth. It's rare that I see a project that's new to me that is novel, right? Sure, you can build a better mousetrap, and you can find a better way to deliver food to customers in exchange for money, but it's just not. It's just not like, we're still kind of doing the same across the industry. We're still selling food and beverage, right? Which I still love. And we're still finding sort of new-ish ways to do that. But it's, it's not, we're not, in terms of the design and development and construction, we're still talking about nuts and bolts, and we're talking about plumbing, and we're like still real world stuff. And it's easy to come in with a high concept on one side in terms of what you're going to do and how you package the actual transaction of exchanging food and beverage for money. But when you actually have to build that thing, like we're still building things largely the same way we have for a long time.
You might not agree with this statement. I am totally blown away at the money and resources that people put into design. I know it's important. I know that we're delivering experience with the physical space.
Yeah.
I know I'm not ignorant to that when people go into a space that they're being influenced at a subconscious level, right? I do think that is important and should be considered, but I also think about the amount of that people aren't willing to spend on like surrounding yourself with the right internal day-to-day equipment, not necessarily the hardware, but like the technology to be able to manage more efficiently.
Yeah.
Like investing in a tech stack that will help you manage your business, or investing in the actual human talent, paying people well, you know, to execute.
Developing.
But all that money goes into a pretty space and like brand new state-of-the-art equipment. And it's like, how many tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars are you spending on that? And you don't even know if your business is going to be successful yet.
Yeah. You know, therein lies all the proof of concept endeavors, the prototyping on the fast casual and QSR, the Cava and Sweetgreen, or the Chipotle, Raising Cane's, the world and whatnot. Those didn't come from nothing. They didn't start out as a 200 unit operation, right? They started out with something very small, proof of concept. They didn't spend any money. And then on the independent restaurant side, you're not going to be a first time restaurant developer unless you're only by definition a first time if you're doing it for the first time. You're not going to get the funding to blow the bank on interior design and on art and lighting and fixtures and whatnot. But once you've proven yourself and you've got the backing and people have the faith in you and you've got the investment track record that you're going to return on that, now you're at the point where you actually have to spend that money on the design and on the furnishing and on the and on the equipment, because you're going to be successful, right? You've built the brand, whether it's the chef or the whatever the team is that's developing, or the restaurant group. You are guaranteed to get 6 months of runway, right? People are going to come. People are clamoring for it, whatever it may be. And so you have to deliver on that so that you can be there 6 years later or 10 years later and still drive a delightful, maybe even surprising guest experience. And there's no, I'm a huge believer in design and design thinking and the process and the value that lends to a space and the vibe that people have when they come in. And does that drive check average, right?
Right.
That's a real critical question.
I think really for me, it's like the amount of money you're willing to spend on build out and not have for operating capital.
That's just a poor business model to come in without an understanding of what your runway needs from day one, from first day of business.
I think it's just as simple as starting small. People, they kind of like, I think they come up working for these restaurateurs that have been in the industry for 20, 30 years, that have built that momentum, that have built that depth of network and resources to build things out to the specs that they want. And then you have this young person that comes and they want that today.
Yeah.
And then realize that, Thomas Keller had a restaurant fail before opening the French Laundry.
Most of them had many failures.
Exactly. Yeah. And that you start small. In business, you blow out a wall, you take over the adjacent business, and you scale over time. And it takes time to get those things.
Brings me back to another sort of overarching kind of design thinking, or sort of another North Star for us, is in line with what I was saying before about not holding too tightly to what you want, or what your vision of a space could be.
It can still be your vision. It just won't be your vision tomorrow.
Yeah. And, your clients, your customers, your guests are going to tell you what you are, and they're going to tell you what you're good at, and they're going to tell you what your next move should be. If you're listening to them and you're sensitive to what you're hearing from them, and I do this as a business owner who works entirely on behalf of clients, I hear from them what we're good at.
Yeah.
Right? I could tell you what I think we're good at, and I know what we're good at But I know that because of what we've heard from our clients over these years, dozens, dozens and dozens of projects, and trying to force a concept into a space that doesn't want to accept it, I think, is the most common mistake. We see this all the time where folks will call us and they have a concept in mind. It's this or it's that or whatever it may be. And now they're looking for real estate and they find a space, again, that they like the location or whatever, but it's like, yeah, your concept, not so great for this space, but that's their concept. On the flip side, if you've got the experience and the people on your team who can do it this way, find a good location and figure out what's going to work there. What do the people around there need? Are you in an office area? Are you in a suburban area? Are you driven by DoorDash and Uber Eats? And that's blown up the whole side of the industry as well in terms of how we're organizing kitchens and, we're dedicating entire pickup zones for, third-party drivers,
right,
and that whole system, because it's a massive part of most, outside of fine dining, it's a big part of most operations.
A lot of the revenue, sometimes up to 50% of the revenue comes through those platforms.
Yep, you got it.
Depending on the market and the business model.
And to think that we can just design a space that doesn't pay attention to the specific needs of that portion of your revenue,
right,
even if it's 25% of your revenue,
right,
that's huge.
Yeah.
1 out of every 4 people.
We've covered a lot today, man, and I'm not done yet.
Only a little.
We've shared your story. We've talked about what you do today, what your business looks like today. You've given some value on how we can do what we're, you've shed some light on your area of expertise. I do like to talk about the future, and not so much where do you think the future is going, but also where do you think we could go? Like, what is the direction instead of reacting to trends and reacting to consumers, like, is there a proactive, intentional place for the future of the food and beverage industry, or is that a pipe dream?
It's a great question, and it's a great sort of thought exercise, I think, that I hadn't given any. I should have known you were going to ask something like that. Experienced podcaster like yourself. I do think that the industry continues to drive towards better work environments, towards better, more equitable pay for everybody on the industry. Now, that's not to say that you get a job at White Castle and you should be able to make a career out of that. Those aren't those kinds of jobs, right? That's a stepping stone to another opportunity within the industry. But I do think that, the industry continues, especially we're more predominantly on a traditional hospitality side, hotels and restaurants, a lot of restaurants. But I think across the board, it's still, the industry has become much more acknowledged as a professional endeavor. You're not just like the dumb kid who couldn't do anything else, and so you wind up in the restaurant industry, right? It's a place where you can really go and sort of make a mark. Now, as far as trends and all that, I mean, there's design trends and sustainability and efficiency trends and all electric kitchens and all that stuff we're involved with, and be happy to talk about at length in some other episode. But it is a really interesting, we're at, and not to be overtly political or otherwise, but we are at a rather unique inflection point. The industry is being assaulted by forces that are really, really hitting hard on the workforce. What
are these forces you're talking about? Be specific.
I'm talking about DHS and ICE.
Okay.
And they are making things extremely, extremely difficult, unnecessarily so, for a massive portion of the food and beverage and hospitality workforce. I mean, the immigrant communities across the country are the ones who cook the food, make the beds, scrub the toilets, mop the floors. And that's not to say that, of course not, that's not all of immigrants or new Americans or otherwise. There is no one. Right? They're part of our community. We're a part of their community, but very specifically, more so to food and beverage and construction, I think, than most. Food and beverage, construction, and agriculture. It's a vast majority of the workforce.
Yeah, and that's the hospitality industry hits on all three of those.
Yep, pretty much, and it's under siege, and that I don't like it at all. I think we've got major problems. I think we absolutely have challenges around building and sustainability and climate change, like all these things are factors that the food and beverage industry absolutely needs to be contending with if for no other reason than, personal politics and just a goal towards making good conscientious decisions for each other. And especially in these environments where you're working side by side with folks who are new Americans or who are, come here recently.
I agree with everything you said. I also think that pointing at ICE and saying that's the problem is like putting a Band-Aid on an axe wound. It's like, it's so much bigger than that.
It is much bigger than that. I agree. That's the inflection point we're at right now, though, where I have clients, right, who I have gone to visit job sites. You've traveled recently through the South and through Texas, I know, and the workforces there are almost entirely Latino.
Right.
And I have been in client restaurants while they are delivering their operational decisions on what to do if immigration comes to the restaurant.
Do you think AI is going to influence this?
I mean, AI is going to influence everything.
Right.
And
it's hard to say how that's going to ripple.
It's hard to say how that's going to ripple. It's definitely going to ripple across all of these areas. Pretty much anytime, right? Anytime you need to, like whether it's that particular restaurant operator who needed to develop a plan for what to do if immigration or ICE or DHS comes to their restaurant. And this is even, amongst restaurants who are entirely above board, right? We're not talking under the table employees or undocumented or these are still just restaurants with a big immigrant workforce.
Yeah.
But these are folks who are here legally and have green cards and whatnot, but they're still environments wherein folks are scared and folks are challenged. This is one other layer of challenge for the business owner, for the restaurant operator to suddenly now have to deal with immigration enforcement when they've been doing everything by the book and according to standard HR practices and whatnot, and they're operating totally lawfully. And now all of a sudden, it's hitting the hospitality trade real hard.
I hear you, man. And I think it's such a bigger problem that is on the horizon, or I think there's no other time to start thinking in terms of conscious capitalism or social capitalism.
I agree.
Look, if we continue in this direction, the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer.
I agree with that.
Is universal high income the solution? But what do we lose with that? A sense of autonomy? We want that. We can't lose our autonomy, our freedom to do what calls to us. Like only in a capitalist or country could you chart the kind of path that you charted for yourself.
100%.
We can't lose that.
Or in an open economy.
Right.
Yeah.
But what are we doing? Who are we giving our money to as these tech companies continue to grow? Are we consciously putting our money into solutions? And right now, there's a real flat hierarchy in that next wave.
Yeah.
And we really need to be intentional and conscious about who are we going to let win that race, because whoever wins that race wins it all.
Yeah.
And we have to invest our resources into the entity, whether that be open AI or something like that, with that vision of creating, democratizing and decentralizing that power of who controls the AI, because whoever controls that data controls the world.
It's a crazy set of circumstances when the federal government tells the states that the states are not allowed to regulate AI within their own borders.
It's crazy.
It's crazy, right? That's because
it's bigger than those borders.
It's bigger than those borders, and so there should be a federal. There should be some federal regulation, and it should absolutely be a regulated environment, right? Even the folks who are developing AI think that it should be.
But I think this is where conscious capitalism comes in, where it's like conscious capitalism is who am I choosing to give my money to, because that is the future I want.
Yeah, if there are options.
But I think the only way is to talk about it.
Yeah.
And is to explore what those different scenarios look like. And it's so complicated and so big, it's so hard to know what the right direction is. But I do think that white collar jobs are going to be going away. A lot of the executive and strategic level jobs are going to be going away because maybe AI isn't there yet, but in 5 or 10 years, when I can walk into a restaurant with my glasses that have a camera, and it can access a data pool of every restaurant that's been designed ever, and it has access to the zoning and the city coordinates, and like it will give you like all the things. Like we're just getting to that point where like I think people are going to revert back to more blue collar work of farming and hospitality and you know,
and we're going to have no choice.
But I think that's a good thing, because at the end of the day, like our entire existence, I mentioned I love archaeology and anthropology.
Yeah.
We are hunter gatherers by evolution. Like we are tribal, small knit. Like we are so tied to food, and food has become a literal commodity.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that when the rest of the world kind of can figure itself out, and that opens up bandwidth to kind of reconnect with what matters, which is our food system, and developing a food system for the future, there's a lot of opportunity in that world.
I agree. There is a lot of decisions that need to be considered, and I think the extent to which, and it's certainly a part of a marketing pitch, is to have a good story about your business or otherwise. But I really do believe that, you know, folks who are approaching their businesses and their food and beverage establishments, especially from a really conscientious place, one that cares for themselves and their team, as well as the customer and their guests and whatnot, whether you're, you know, a packaged good or otherwise. But I mean, I think that's a good way to go, because you feel good operating your own business when you know that you are providing a good value. I certainly feel better when I'm really conscious of the value that I'm providing to clients, and knowing that it's an exchange of value, and that we're providing you with something that you need. It's a relationship, of course, and we're providing you with something that you need, and you're providing us with something that we need, of course, which is money. And I got staff, and we have an arrangement here, right? We're still in a capitalist society and an economy that requires that. And it's okay to also approach all of that in a sort of friendly, easygoing kind of manner, which is a bit of an approach that I've always taken. Could just be my, sort of Jersey jabroni background, but none of this needs to be high anxiety. None of the work that we do needs to be all that drama filled.
Right.
And we just try to keep things like focused on the people that we're working with and in support of their sort of business goals. And I know that there are really big, broad factors and influences at play across the industry, across all of the industries that we just mentioned. And I don't know where they're going.
Yeah.
I
don't think anybody truly knows, and there's so many variables, and there's like one big discovery away from that future vision totally being turned upside down. It's happening so fast.
Yeah.
It's interesting, but I think I'm excited because information, I think, for the first time is fragmented. Where we get our inspiration, like podcasts are like the number one way people get their information.
Yeah.
It's replaced traditional
news organizations.
Yeah.
Independent journalism, independent media is definitely, it's where I get the vast majority of my news and information.
That's the first step, is decentralizing the source of information.
Yeah.
And, I think that's really exciting, but that could change too if we're not careful. So this has been so much fun, Alec. Thank you, man. I really appreciate it. I got a couple of questions I ask all my guests that I'm going to try to tailor for your unique path as a designer specialist.
Okay.
What is one thing about your business, a value, a process, a system that makes you truly unstoppable?
Oh, you got to take care of the client. Well, two things. I got to take care of my people. And if I take care of my people, I know they're going to take care of the clients, right? Our number one goal is in service of our clients' goals. So if we're taking care of that, if we're looking ahead on their behalf, then we're good.
Is there a company you've started working with that has really changed the game for you in terms of a strategist or a partner that you outsource your world to? An element of what you do?
No.
No.
I'd say that there are some support in terms of the tech stack. There are things that we use that obviously lots of people use, but
like what?
Like Slack is the key piece for us in terms of internal communication. I know it's not the only messaging type platform, but for us, that's been tremendous in terms of being able to manage our inboxes and manage our, our time spent in our inbox versus our time spent actually doing work.
Yeah.
That's been key. Again, the food service equipment and supplies industry is still this lumbering beast of an industry. Many billions of dollars a year in food service equipment sales. The top 5 food service equipment distributors alone probably represent $7 or $8 billion a year, and there's dozens more after that. A few hundred more across the country. It moves kind of slow.
Yeah. Is that a problem?
Yes and no. I mean, it's hard for manufacturing to move fast, and it's really hard for manufacturing. And when I say that, I'm thinking in terms of energy efficiency, sustainability, climate sensitive equipment, and cooking techniques and whatnot that are important and that are becoming much more common. But with the combination of manufacturing regulations, licensing requirements, it takes 3, 4, 5 years to develop a new piece of equipment.
That's wild.
It's wild, yeah. And it's like, for refrigeration manufacturers especially, you've got a whole bunch of different legislative bodies that control your efficiency, that control what products you can use. They make mandates that are, if you ask some of the refrigeration companies, they'll tell you like these mandates are not possible by the laws of physics. Yeah. We can't make this amount of cold with this amount of refrigerant. It just doesn't work, right? Yeah. And then we've got equipment that's out in the field that doesn't work because you're opening that fridge door 125 times in a night. It's a complex system with a lot of variables.
Wild. What is one thing, if the mission statement is to inspire, empower, and transform the industry, how have you personally transformed? How are you a better man today than the man you were when you got started in this?
It maybe sounds a little redundant. I'm made better by working hard on behalf of my clients. I have not lost the service mentality approach despite being outside of typical service and hospitality. I know that we are very much in service of our clients, who are in turn in service in their marketplaces on behalf of their guests. We're always looking out for the food and beverage cooks and pot washers and whatnot, and prep cooks, folks on the hotline. We're really looking out for them in terms of how we design things. We're really thinking about the ergonomics and the time and motion required so that they have good quality working environments, good indoor air quality, all that. It's good.
Got it.
Yeah.
This is the last question. It's a doozy.
Okay.
If you got the news, you'd be leaving this world tomorrow. All the memories of you, your work, your businesses, the restaurants you've worked in, were lost with your departure, with the exception of 3 pieces of wisdom that you could leave behind for the good of humanity and your legacy. What would those 3 pieces of wisdom be?
Take care of each other. It's always better to have more than one way to get from point A to point B. And right size your expectations.
This has been so much fun, man. Thank you.
Thank you.
I like to wrap up every conversation. I'd like to say that word of mouth is what steers the ship. When you think about people doing good things in this industry, challenging the status quo, taking care of their staff, creating opportunity for others, really making an impact, not just in their own lives, but in the lives of those they touch, who comes to mind? Who do you think I should make an example of in the restaurant industry?
Oh, man, there's a lot. Somebody that does come to mind, though, whenever I'm thinking about, as I noted before, and I say this to a lot of people when asked about this, how the industry has professionalized over these years. I think a lot about Chef Ori Minash and his wife Genevieve. They got a couple restaurants in LA, Bestia and Bavel and Safi's, and they're fantastic operators, and they're really conscientious with their guests. And they really did a lot for their staff and their employees during COVID in terms of providing a meal service. They turned their restaurants into meal provision services for their employees and continued purchasing product from their purveyors and providing, to-go food solely, to-go food for sale to the public solely so that they could continue supporting their staff. Watching their team meetings before service, their pre-service meeting, it's really inspiring. And they run very busy restaurants, and I know how stressful that is. Yeah. And then here locally, somebody I know who you've talked to is Chef Eric Warnstedt, from Hen of the Wood and Heirloom Hospitality. Those guys run great operations, really conscientious, huge supporters of our local food network here in Vermont. Tons of local product use. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of people like that. I mean, those guys come to mind.
I'd love to get Eric back on the show. We're due. It's been, I think, over 6 years since I last spoke to him, so a lot's changed since then. It'd be great. And is it Ori and Genevieve? Look out, I'm coming out. They're out in San Francisco?
LA.
Hopefully you'll be making it back there in the next couple of years.
Yeah.
This has been a lot of fun, man.
There's a lot of great people in the industry. I mean, I consider myself really lucky that I continue to get to work with the people that I get to work with and that my team gets to work with.
Well, I consider myself lucky to be able to sit across this table from you today, man. It's been a lot of fun. I do want to plant a little seed. I'd love to have you come talk to my community within Restaurant Unstoppable Network. You are a specialist, and I'm trying to mirror what's happening on this podcast in the network. If you were to come talk to my community and to lead a conversation, how could you help the people that are listening to this? Whether it just be people coming to you with questions about design and build out, like what would that subject be? How could you most help my listeners?
Yeah. In line with a lot of what we've talked about and what I've said a number of times, like they'll tell me how I can be most helpful. I think open Q&A that runs the gamut from, what should I be asking my landlord for, to is this a good looking design and layout that I got from so-and-so, to what's your opinion on induction cooking? Like all that stuff is part of our normal conversation on a day-to-day basis, right?
Well, if you have questions for Alec, be sure to stick around for the closing thoughts, the outro of today's episode. I'll have a day and time that he'll be joining us live in the network about a month after this goes live.
Yeah.
And again, I cannot do what I do without people like you. Thank you so much. There is no questioning, Alec. You are unstoppable.
Thank you.
Cheers.
You as well.
Thanks.